Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk about something that might challenge everything you've been taught about relationships, friendship, and what it means to live a fulfilling life. Imagine this: a woman walks into a room confident, composed, unbothered by whispers or judgmental stares. She doesn't have a crowd around her. No endless stream of texts buzzing on her phone. No social media notifications lighting up her screen. At first glance, people assume she's lonely, unhappy, or somehow incomplete. But here's the twist: she's none of those things. In fact, she's one of the strongest individuals you'll ever meet. Her name? Shi Heng Yi. And today, we're diving deep into her story, not just hers, but the universal truth behind every woman who chooses solitude over superficiality, self-respect over societal expectations, and authenticity over applause. Let me ask you something right now. Have you ever felt misunderstood because your choices didn't align with what others expected of you? Have you ever chosen to step back from toxic relationships, even if it meant being labeled as cold or antisocial? If so, stick around, because this isn't just another motivational speech. This is a call to action, a reminder that true strength lies not in how many people surround you, but in how deeply you honor yourself. By the end of this video, I promise you'll see solitude in a way you never thought possible. You'll understand why walking alone can be one of the most empowering decisions you'll ever make. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Body expanded content. In our society, there's a dangerous misconception that equates aloneness with loneliness. From a young age, women are conditioned to believe their worth is tied to their ability to fit in, to build friendships, maintain popularity, and stay socially accepted. We're told that having a wide circle of friends is proof of happiness, success, and emotional fulfillment. But what happens when the opposite is true? What happens when a woman like Shi Heng Yi steps away from the noise, the drama, and the relentless pressure to conform? Shi Heng Yi knows better than anyone that solitude and loneliness are two very different things. Loneliness is a hollow ache, a feeling of disconnection that can linger even in a crowded room. It's the pain of not being seen, not being heard, and not being valued for who you truly are. Solitude, on the other hand, is a conscious choice. It's a space where silence becomes a sanctuary, reflection turns into growth, and self-awareness blooms like a flower reaching towards sunlight. For Shi Heng Yi, solitude isn't emptiness, it's empowerment. It's the freedom to sit quietly without needing external validation, to walk through life without constantly seeking approval from others. But how does someone arrive at this place of intentional solitude? Often it starts with painful lessons. Many women, including Shi Heng Yi, reach a breaking point after years of giving endlessly only to realize they've received little in return. Picture this: she once poured her time, energy, and trust into friendships that were one-sided. She showed up for people who ghosted her when she needed them most. She kept secrets for friends who gossiped about her behind her back. Over time, these experiences taught her a hard truth: not everyone deserves access to your world. Being liked by everyone often comes at the cost of losing pieces of yourself. This realization sparked a transformation within her, one that didn't come with fireworks or grand declarations, but rather as a quiet shift in the way she saw herself and the world around her. Shi Heng Yi began to peel back the layers of expectation, both internal and external, and ask herself what truly mattered when it came to human connection. She started to redefine not just what friendship meant to her, but what it could mean, what it should mean. No longer did she find herself drawn to relationships built on convenience or obligation, those fleeting interactions that left her feeling more alone than before. The kind of friendships that only showed up when it was easy, that disappeared during hard times, or that existed solely out of habit rather than heartfelt choice, they no longer served her. Instead, she began seeking something deeper, something real. She craved connections that weren't afraid of silence, that didn't shy away from vulnerability, and that stood firm even when life got messy. She discovered the power of consistency, the beauty of showing up for someone again and again, not because you have to, but because you want to. She began valuing people who stayed, who listened without judgment, and who celebrated her wins without jealousy. Sincerity became non-negotiable. She no longer had room for flattery masked as affection, or for words that sounded good but carried no weight behind them. Her heart grew discerning, and she learned to trust its instincts. In this journey, she also learned one of the most profound lessons of all: Quality will always outweigh quantity. She realized that having 10 shallow connections, people who knew her name but not her story, who shared space but not substance, could never compare to having just one person who truly understood her soul. One person who knew her fears, her dreams, her quirks, and still chose to stay. One person who could sit with her in silence and still feel like they were communicating volumes. And so she made peace with solitude. If those rare, meaningful relationships hadn't yet found her, she refused to settle for anything less than what she deserved. She embraced being alone not as a state of loneliness, but as a place of strength. A sacred space where she could grow, reflect, and build a foundation strong enough to support the kind of love and friendship she truly desired. To outsiders, her circle may have looked empty, sparse, or even lonely. But in truth, it was simply uncrowded. Every person within it had earned their place through trust, time, and mutual respect. She had chosen integrity over popularity, authenticity over applause, and depth over distraction. And in doing so, she created a space for relationships that felt like home, where every conversation mattered, every presence was cherished, and every bond was built to last. Shi Heng Yi's transformation wasn't about becoming someone new, it was about returning to her truest self. And in that return, she found freedom. Choosing solitude over toxicity is not an act of retreat. It is a declaration of self-worth. It takes immense courage to walk away from environments, relationships, or even friendships that drain your energy, compromise your values, or chip away at your sense of identity. Shi Heng Yi understood this deeply. She knew that silence in the presence of chaos was sometimes louder than words. That walking away didn't mean weakness, it meant wisdom. And so she chose herself not selfishly, but sacredly. Society often misjudges women like her, those who choose stillness over drama, boundaries over approval, and inner peace over external validation. They are labeled as cold when they simply refuse to burn themselves out trying to keep others warm. They're called difficult for daring to speak their truth instead of swallowing it to make others comfortable. They're seen as antisocial when really they're just socially selective, choosing connection with intention rather than obligation. But beneath the surface of these quiet choices lies a strength that few truly recognize. It's not the kind of strength that shouts or demands attention. It's the kind that sits calmly in its power, unshaken by gossip, unaffected by judgment, and unmoved by trends. Shi Heng Yi embodies this subtle yet unbreakable force. She doesn't move with the herd because she knows that crowds can blur vision, dilute purpose, and drown out the voice within. She refuses to lose herself in numbers when she has already found herself in solitude. Her resilience is woven into every boundary she sets, clear, firm, and non-negotiable. She learned early on that saying no could be more powerful than saying yes, especially when it protected her peace. Her silence became a language of its own, one that spoke volumes about her self-awareness, her self-control, and her refusal to engage in battles that no longer served her growth. In a world that often equates visibility with value, she chose presence over performance. And in that space of intentional living, she discovered something extraordinary. She was enough, completely, wholly, and undeniably enough. Whether surrounded by laughter or wrapped in solitude, whether celebrated or overlooked, she knew her worth was not dictated by others' opinions. She carried confidence not from external validation, but from the deep knowing that she had chosen authenticity over conformity and peace over pleasing. Shi Heng Yi stands apart not because she wants to be alone, but because she understands the difference between being lonely and being alone with purpose. She walks a path carved by self-respect, guided by truth, and lit by the quiet fire of someone who has made peace with herself. And in doing so, she becomes a beacon for others, a reminder that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the woman who walks quietly, head held high, heart full of clarity, and soul finally free. Boundaries play a crucial role in her journey, woven not as cold walls meant to isolate, but as carefully crafted shields designed to protect her inner peace. For much of her life, Shi Heng Yi struggled with the weight of expectations, both external and self-imposed. She had been raised to believe that kindness meant always being available, that love required constant sacrifice, and that saying no was synonymous with selfishness. But somewhere along the way, she began to notice a pattern. Every time she bent herself into uncomfortable shapes to accommodate others, she felt a little less like herself. It wasn't bitterness that taught her this lesson, it was exhaustion. the kind of tired that settles deep in the bones, born from years of giving more than she received, of smiling when she wanted to cry, and of staying in situations long past their expiration date. It was only when she found herself standing at the edge of emotional burnout that she understood. Peace is not something that can be borrowed or gifted by others. It must be fiercely guarded, intentionally built, and constantly maintained. So she began to change. She stopped answering calls that drained her spirit before they even began. She stopped justifying her needs or apologizing for taking up space. She stopped entertaining energy vampires who mistook her kindness for weakness, and she stopped giving the benefit of the doubt to people who had already proven themselves unworthy of it. These weren't rejections made out of spite or anger, they were acts of self-preservation rooted in wisdom. Shi Heng Yi learned that healing is not a passive process. It doesn't simply arrive with time. It requires effort, intention, and often difficult decisions. Recovery has a cost, and sometimes that cost comes in the form of lost relationships, missed opportunities, or moments of loneliness. But she also discovered that protecting her peace was non-negotiable. Without it, there was no clarity, no strength, no foundation from which to grow. These boundaries became her compass. They reminded her that her well-being mattered not just to herself, but to everyone who truly cared about her. She realized that loving others didn't have to mean losing herself in the process. In fact, the more whole she became, the more authentically she could show up for those around her. Her love became stronger, not weaker, because it came from a place of choice rather than obligation. Through this transformation, she gained more than peace, she gained power. Not the kind that dominates or controls, but the quiet, unshakable strength that comes from knowing who you are, what you need, and how to protect both without apology. Through her healing process, Shi Heng Yi developed a clarity that had once felt unattainable. It didn't come all at once, no grand revelation or sudden epiphany, but rather through the accumulation of small, deliberate choices. She began to see her past not as a series of wounds she needed to fix, but as lessons that had shaped her into someone capable of deep self-awareness. One of the most profound realizations she came to was that closure is rarely given, it must be taken. She stopped chasing explanations, apologies, or resolutions from those who had hurt her. Instead, she turned inward, where true healing begins. In doing so, she discovered the strength in silence. For years, she had believed that every conflict required a conversation, that every misunderstanding needed to be addressed, and that every wound deserved an explanation. But she learned that sometimes the loudest truths are spoken without words. Silence became her sanctuary, a space where she could process, heal, and protect her energy without being pulled into cycles of drama or toxicity. It wasn't avoidance, it was wisdom. She understood that walking away, whether physically, emotionally, or energetically, was sometimes the most loving thing she could do for herself. Her journey toward wholeness was neither linear nor glamorous. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when old patterns tried to creep back in. Healing, she realized, doesn't follow a timeline. Some mornings she woke up feeling strong and centered, others she struggled to get out of bed. But what mattered most was her consistency in choosing peace over people-pleasing, truth over comfort, and growth over familiarity. She celebrated the quiet victories, the way she could now walk away from conversations that no longer served her, the way she could sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, the way she could say no, even when it made her seem distant or cold. Each no was not a rejection of others, but an affirmation of her own worth. She refused to apologize for her boundaries or soften her edges to make others feel more at ease. She rewired the way she interacted with the world, no longer basing her value on how much she could give or how many roles she could fulfill. Her relationships began to shift not because she demanded change, but because she modeled it. The people who remained in her life were those who respected her truth, honored her limits, and contributed to her joy. More importantly, she no longer sought validation from those who couldn't provide it. She let go of the need to be liked by everyone, to explain her decisions, or to justify her feelings. Authenticity became her standard, both for herself and for those around her. She pursued connections rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and emotional reciprocity. Anything less than that, she realized, was a distraction from the life she was building, one grounded in integrity, peace, and purpose. Shi Heng Yi's transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about returning to who she had always been beneath the expectations, the pain, and the noise. And in that return, she found freedom. Now, imagine seeing a woman like Shi Heng Yi walking confidently through life with her head held high, eyes clear, and spirit unburdened by the weight of others' expectations. She moves with purpose, unaffected by the noise around her, unshaken by the pressures society so often places on women to be soft, accommodating, and endlessly available. To an outside observer, one perhaps still bound by conventional ideals, it might be tempting to look at her and feel pity. After all, how lonely she must be. How cold, how disconnected from the things that truly matter in life. But that assumption couldn't be further from the truth. There's a kind of defiance in her existence that isn't loud or confrontational, but deeply powerful nonetheless. It lies in the way she chooses herself, not selfishly, but intentionally. She no longer looks to others to define her worth, nor does she wait for permission to step into her power. She has learned that identity is not something given by others. It is something claimed, nurtured, and fiercely protected. And in doing so, she challenges the very foundation of cultural norms that have long dictated what a woman should be. She refuses to be boxed into roles that diminish her complexity. She is not only someone's friend, lover, caretaker, or supporter, she is her own person with dreams, desires, boundaries, and ambitions that exist outside the framework of relational obligation. In a world that often equates a woman's value with her ability to serve others, Shi Heng Yi dares to prioritize her own needs without apology. This is not rejection, it is reclamation. She reclaims her time, no longer wasting it on relationships that drain rather than nourish. She reclaims her voice, speaking up not to please, but to express her truth. She reclaims her presence, showing up fully in her own life instead of fading into the background to make space for others. Every choice she makes is rooted in a deep understanding of her worth, and every boundary she sets is a declaration. I am here, and I will not shrink to make you comfortable. In this, she becomes more than just a woman who walks alone. She becomes a symbol of possibility, a reminder that fulfillment doesn't always come from being chosen by others, but from choosing yourself again and again. That happiness doesn't require validation from the crowd, but alignment with your inner compass. That living authentically may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. Shi Heng Yi's life is not one of sadness or loss. It is one of courage, clarity, and conviction. And anyone who mistakes her strength for isolation, her silence for weakness, or her independence for loneliness simply hasn't learned to see beyond the surface. Because beneath that calm exterior is a woman who has fought for every ounce of peace she now possesses, and that, more than anything, deserves respect. Shi Heng Yi teaches us that strength isn't always loud or dramatic. It doesn't need applause, nor does it demand attention. True strength often whispers. It's in the quiet decision to walk away from a conversation that no longer serves you. It's in the courage to say no when saying yes would have been easier. It's in the resilience to keep going even when no one is watching. Hers is not the kind of power that shouts. It's the kind that radiates a steady, unshakable energy that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. Healing, she discovered, is not a performance. It doesn't require an audience, nor should it be shared with just anyone. There was a time when she felt compelled to explain her pain, to justify her withdrawal, or to prove that she deserved peace. But as she grew, she realized that healing is sacred. It belongs to the self, and sometimes it must happen in silence, away from prying eyes and unsolicited opinions. She stopped seeking permission to heal, and instead gave herself grace, recognizing that recovery is messy, non-linear, and deeply personal. Self-respect, she learned, sometimes means standing alone. Not because she prefers isolation, but because she values integrity more than inclusion. She refuses to trade her peace for popularity or her truth for temporary acceptance. In a world that often equates connection with compromise, Shi Heng Yi chooses alignment over approval. She understands that real validation doesn't come from external applause or social media likes, it comes from within, from waking up each morning and feeling proud of the person you've chosen to become. Her self-possession is bold not in the way of defiance for its own sake, but in the way of deep inner knowing. She carries herself with a quiet confidence that doesn't seek to impress or compete. Her presence alone disrupts outdated notions of what a woman should be: soft-spoken, endlessly accommodating, always available. Instead, she embodies something far more powerful: emotional sovereignty. She is whole on her own, not lacking, not waiting to be completed by someone else. And in doing so, she invites others to reflect on their own lives. She reminds us to evaluate the relationships we maintain. Are they truly meaningful, or are they simply familiar? Are they nurturing our growth, or are they just filling space out of habit or fear of being alone? She challenges us to consider whether our connections are built on mutual respect and emotional reciprocity, or if we're clinging to comfort at the expense of our well-being. She also redefines what happiness looks like. In a culture obsessed with busy calendars and endless social engagements, she dares to ask, does being surrounded by people always mean we're fulfilled? Or are we mistaking noise for joy? She encourages us to slow down, to examine the intention behind our interactions, and to prioritize emotional authenticity over superficial connection. Presence, she shows us, matters far more than proximity. Shi Heng Yi's life is not about rejecting love, friendship, or community. It's about choosing them consciously on her terms, with clarity and purpose. She doesn't close doors out of anger, she closes them out of wisdom. And in opening only those that align with her truth, she creates space for deeper, more meaningful bonds to form. In every step she takes, she inspires not through grand gestures, but through the consistency of her choices. She reminds us that living authentically is not always easy, but it is always worth it. That peace is not passive, it must be protected. That strength is not measured by how much we endure, but by how well we honor ourselves. And above all, she proves that a woman who chooses herself is not someone to pity. She is someone to admire. So, here's my question to you. How will you honor yourself today? Not tomorrow. Not when things are easier or when life finally lines up in your favor, but right now in this moment. Will you continue seeking approval from a world that thrives on conformity, constantly shifting its standards and never quite being satisfied? Or will you begin to turn inward to start listening to that quiet voice inside that knows what you truly need, even when it's drowned out by expectations? This isn't just about self-care routines or occasional indulgences. It's about something deeper. It's about respect, real, unwavering respect for who you are at your core. It's about recognizing that you are not here to impress, to fit in, or to earn your place by shrinking or pretending. You are here to live fully, authentically, and with intention. Take a moment to reflect on your relationships, not just romantic ones, but all the connections that shape your daily life. Who adds real value to your existence? Who sees you, supports you, and encourages you to grow into the fullest version of yourself? And more importantly, who simply tolerates you, drains your energy, or tries to mold you into someone you're not? It's time to stop measuring connection by how many people are around you and start measuring it by how deeply you feel seen, heard, and respected. Ask yourself who aligns with who you truly are, not who you were 5 years ago, not who others expect you to be, but who you are becoming right now in this stage of your journey. This kind of reflection can be uncomfortable. It may reveal truths you've been avoiding, like the fact that some people in your life don't actually support your growth, that some relationships are built more on habit than heart, that sometimes staying in a situation out of fear of change is costing you far more than you realize. But with awareness comes choice, and with choice comes freedom. Are you willing to set boundaries to protect your peace? Not the soft, easily broken kind that bend under pressure, but the firm, unshakable kind that say, this is who I am and this is what I need. Are you ready to stop justifying your needs and start honoring them? To walk away from conversations that drain you, situations that confuse your spirit, and people who refuse to meet you halfway? Because peace doesn't come from having everything figured out, it comes from making space for clarity, healing, and growth. It comes from choosing stillness over chaos, truth over comfort, and self-respect over short-term validation. Shi Heng Yi's journey teaches us that living with integrity is not always easy, but it is always worth it. And yours does too. Every time you choose yourself, you affirm your worth. Every time you speak your truth, you reclaim your power. Every time you walk away from what no longer serves you, you open the door for something better. So again I ask, how will you honor yourself today? The answer lies not in grand gestures, but in small, consistent choices. The choice to rest instead of overextend, to speak up instead of staying silent, to walk away instead of staying stuck, to love yourself enough to do what's right, not what's expected. And if you're not sure where to begin, start with one thing, one boundary, one honest conversation with yourself. Because once you begin honoring who you really are, everything else begins to fall into place. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Let it ripple outward, share it with someone who needs to hear it, even if that someone is you. Sometimes the words we read or hear are exactly what we needed at precisely the right moment. If this story, this journey of Shi Heng Yi, stirred something within you, then it was meant for you and perhaps for someone else too. Take a moment to reflect before moving on. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear your perspective, your own experiences, and how you're choosing to honor yourself in your daily life. Healing is not a solitary journey forever. There is strength in community, in shared stories, in knowing that you are not alone. So let's build that space together, one honest word, one brave reply at a time. And as you walk away from this moment, remember, solitude isn't a curse. It's not something to fear or avoid at all costs. In fact, it's often where we meet ourselves for the first time without distraction, expectation, or pretense. Solitude is a sanctuary, a sacred space where clarity finds us, where healing begins, and where we learn to sit comfortably in our own presence without needing anyone else to fill the silence. Likewise, authenticity isn't failure, it's freedom. To live authentically is not to have everything figured out, but to be unafraid of showing up as you are, even when it's messy, even when it's unpopular. It's choosing truth over approval, courage over comfort, and self-respect over temporary acceptance. That kind of living doesn't always come with applause, but it comes with peace. And peace, once found, becomes the compass by which we navigate everything else. So whether you're walking alone today or surrounded by a small circle of people who truly see you, do it with intention. Walk through life not just physically, but emotionally grounded, knowing where you stand, why you stand there, and what you're willing to protect. Do it with grace, not because you owe the world softness, but because you carry yourself with dignity, even in moments of quiet strength. And above all, do it with power, not the loud, forceful kind, but the steady, unwavering energy that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. Because the world doesn't need more people chasing noise, more lives built on comparison, validation, and empty approval. It needs more people like Shi Heng Yi. People who've learned not only to survive, but to thrive in their own rhythm. People who've stepped into their truth, reclaimed their boundaries, and chosen themselves without guilt or hesitation. People like you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, for allowing this message to touch your heart, and for considering how you might carry it forward in your own life. Until next time, keep honoring your truth even when it's hard. Keep setting boundaries even when they're misunderstood. And above all, keep choosing yourself every single day in every single way that feels real to you. You've got this. And remember, you already have everything you need to begin again right now.